My name is Shahab Riazi, and I'm part of the customer success setup here at Box, based out of Redwood City. And I have been in and around customer success pretty much all my career. It started out back in the heydays of early 2000s when customer success was still in its infancy. And so I've had the good fortune of seeing this discipline develop to the point that it has today. Of course, there's a great deal of strategic and good imperative amount of strategy that's now in place with customer success initiatives at all companies that have anything to do with cloud, and even companies that are on-prem that are getting into cloud, like SAPs and Oracles of the world. So one of the things that is gaining a lot of traction, has been around, and is gaining a lot of traction is solution selling. Solution selling is a concept that's actually been around for a while. And the idea here is to make a match with the customer and the customer's pain point. When I'm in the marketplace with a product, I might think that is the best thing to happen to the marketplace. But the essential success for that product and for that service comes from its ability to match up with a pain point. And that's part of what customer success is about. There is a good amount of alignment now that's happening between customer success and sales. And I think that's one of the elements that is now producing a lot of traction around the concept of solution selling. Part of solution selling is the concept of building a pain chain. So I'll get right into that because that's what this session is going to focus in on. So we'll go over, what it is, what does it mean, why do CSMs need one? Then we'll go over a little bit of that build methodology. What amount of research is required. The best thing to happen, obviously, in any relationship with a customer is customer conversation, where you actually get to realize and apply your knowledge that you've acquired. And then I'll give a quick example of how I've utilized it in my work. We'll have some time for Q&A aside as well. You're welcome to post your questions in chat, and Ryan and I will go through as many of them as possible towards the later half of the presentation. So let's get right into it, since we only have an hour. So really quickly again, Shahab Riazi, I'm part of the customer success team here at Box. Again, I've been with customer success for a while, so since I've already done this part, I'll skip over this. So what is pain chain? When I thought about the introduction of this piece, one of the things that stood out to me was the fact that an image is worth 1,000 words. And so I wanted to put this up first before I go into definitions and before I go into explanations. This image basically encapsulates what pain chain is about. So imagine you're a customer success manager. You get to talk to your customers, different folks at your customers. Maybe you're fortunate enough to connect with and have some time with the C-suite, perhaps a VP at finance, a CIO, for instance, or maybe even somebody who's an admin level, middle management. What are some of the things that come back at you? It really comes back to the CSM's sort of horsepower of consuming that knowledge and really making sifting the relevant pieces out of that information. So when you talk to a CIO, for instance, his or her concerns are going to be completely different from when you talk to a VP in sales, for instance, or even a CIO. And that's what this pain chain image is showing. So in this example, which is a rather straightforward example, rather simplistic actually, the CEO has identified his pain. His pain is sort of driving earnings per share. That's the pain point that he has. And the reason that he has identified in his mind is erosion of profits. And so when the CEO, who's responsible for the strategy of the company, goes and talks to his direct report, VP of Finance, he's talking about eroding profits. He's not obviously going to take the message directly from, the earnings per share piece. He's going to take the reason that he's identified, which is eroding profits, and go and talk to his VP of Finance. The VP of Finance is going to come up with his own reasons for what he's hearing from the CEO. Right, so his reasons might be completely different. The increased operational cost may be one of them. Increased cost of write-offs, for example, may be another reason. So that VP of Finance, when they go talk to VP of Sales, the pain point that they will identify will come from what they have considered a reason for the eroding profits that the CEO came with. And so that's how sort of the pain chain builds and remains in the organization. VP of Finance going to VP of Sales, enunciating the pain would have a different definition of what that pain is. Again, that pain is relating back to what was the original concern that was brought by the CEO, but now it's identified differently. It's spoken of differently. The terminology and the language is different. And so the CSM's job, if he or she is talking to all these people, is to really identify the structure of that chain and to understand, what each level is talking about. So as you can see in this image, by the time this conversation makes it to the CIO, the pain is completely different from the pain that was identified by the CEO. It has filtered to a point where it has become sharpened. It has been identified by multiple people, and it has basically filtered down to the point where there may be some actionable impetus to the initiative. And that's essentially the idea of the pain chain. So now let's get into what you would call a standard definition, if you will. Basically, the pain chain is a connected sequence. We looked at the image, that we had looked at just the slide before this. It's basically a sequence of problems that the customers face at different levels, right? Each problem is creating a new layer of pain. And always bear in mind that pain chains are a starting point. The way they differ from an org chart is that the map actually shows the flow of the pain in an organization. So if your sales organizations or if your customer success organizations are building org charts, that is not a futile exercise. This is not to say that is irrelevant completely. There may be a need for org chart, and however, pain chain map provides relevance to what you're concerned with. An org chart will obviously have all the different folks that are involved in decision making of one level or the other. But a pain chain provides that imperative that you can follow and identify the people that are going to be important decision makers, pivotal decision makers, when you go talk to them about a proposed solution. So that's how pain chain differs from a standard org chart. Bear in mind that, like an org chart, pain chain is a living breathing organism. It should be modified, can be modified as further information becomes available, as it comes around. It actually is not a static document, of course. So that's what a pain chain is. Now let's actually get into why would CSMs need it? What is the imperative here? What's the motivation? One of the things that I've seen working with pain chain, building pain chain models for my customers and helping other CSMs do that, is that it helps directly with CSMs becoming proactive. It helps them take initiative with a customer. It doesn't. It really allows a customer success manager to look at the solution offering from the customer's perspective. And it's a great tool to help build customer awareness and credibility. I mean, the exercise that is required to build pain chain actually is a great exercise that every CSM should undertake, whether you're building a pain chain or not. It's an exercise that really should help every CSM when it comes to working with their accounts and their customers. So this is sort of the argument for CSM's need for building a pain chain. Next, we'll talk a little bit about how do I build one. Right? So if I'm CSM, I'm talking to an account, and this could be an account at any stage of life cycle, really. What are some of the initiatives that I have to undertake to build a pain chain map? So I've collated some of the sources that I've utilized over the years in building pain chain maps. Obviously, conversation and engagement with the customer is best. There's no alternative to that. But what you will see is I've listed some of the things that the CSMs should do before they have this conversation, before they have this engagement with a customer. There's a great deal of resources that are available today that CSMs probably are already looking at, such as 10K filings, for example. You can find them at company website or your customer website or at the Edgar database search engine, which will allow you to see some of these filings and documents. And those are extremely useful when it comes to understanding, where the customer priorities may lie. There are publicly available transcripts, of course, of quarterly analysts' calls. There are websites such as theorg.com, which I've utilized in the past. It's a great resource. It's available for free, in fact, for you can build up to 10 customer pain chains or org charts in it. And then obviously the other sources are things like news articles from websites like finance.google.com, others as well that you can go to. There's a plethora of resources that is available today for your customers, for you to be able to better understand these customers and work with them. The idea is really to build what I might call a skeleton structure of possible pain points before engaging the customer. And then you validate the sort of gathered data and refine it moving forward as you move into your engagements with the customer. That's sort of the idea of how you build it. So this is not something that you throw at the customer and ask them to build or ask them to build for you. This is something where you take the skeletal structure to them and you start building it from there with your conversations and engagements with the customer. So let's move to that stage. Let's now start thinking about talking to customers. Imagine now that you have a skeletal structure. You've actually gone ahead and listened to their analyst calls. You've actually gone ahead and taken a look at their 10K filings, taken a look at their maybe CEO's interviews or upper management's interviews. And now you're about ready to talk to customers. Before we get into that, I do want to point to some of the social media sources that are available now that weren't available or as available several years ago. There's great resources available at YouTube and at many other social media channels that provide a lot of education about your customers and what their initiatives are, what they care about, what they're thinking about, what the management cares about. So I definitely recommend utilizing that. It's an important source, and it's always a good idea to take a look at that while you're building your pain chain model, to look at those and see where you can get some pearls of wisdom to be added. So now that you're ready to talk to your customers, the thing that's important here is make sure that you're able to align with the customer strategically. So one of the ways to do that is to ensure that you state your objective very, very clearly. The sort of exploratory conversation around adoption and user base starts out a little more loose and then kind of tightens up as things go. But before you get into that, you want to make sure that your objective is clear to the customer. Plus, it's important to ensure that your company's position is succinct, it's clear, that the customer can recall. It may be a slogan, it may be one or two words. For instance, I work at Box. When I go talk to customers, I talk about secure collaboration. That's my position. That's the position that Box has today. We're enhancing that position, of course, at Box, and I don't want to necessarily talk about Box only, but secure collaboration is that succinct position statement. That's a sort of a ground level statement that allows me to then build on to an initiative with a customer. You should provide 2 or 3 facts that support your positioning of the company, of course. How is it that, again, going back to Box's example, how is it that Box is able to keep collaboration secure? How is it that collaboration ease of use doesn't get impacted? Those are some of the things that you want to mention as you move forward. And as I'm talking about Box, think about your company and think about where your organization and your product, and what are some of the seminal facts, the 2 or 3 things that you can identify easily that the customer should be expected to remember, as a leave behind, if you will. I've always found that third-party validation for use cases and adoption is a great tool. I've utilized that for pain chain model building. If one customer is in a silo of, let's say it's an ERP company, or let's say it's a biotech company, you can actually take use cases that are utilized in an example biotech company and apply them here and then refine it from there. Those are great tools to utilize when you're talking to customers, because you'll find that there's a lot of similarity in concerns, and there's a lot of similarity in how customers operate. So that's kind of a great starting point. Using a reference customer, sharing a reference adoption story, those are tools that you can utilize as well. And I've utilized them successfully in the past to really build on that skeleton of a pain chain model. Here, I want to get into the detail of this sort of a customer conversation, if you will. Let's say you have that conversation. Imagine you're sitting in front of a customer. The customer has just heard from you on, what the potential pain is, and what your solution might be for that. This is sort of a vision creation that you've done for the customer. If the customer comes back with saying, hey, yeah, he's having the same problem, the good news there, of course, is that's specifically and exactly what you want. Little to none bad news. This is an opportunity for the CSM to create that adoption vision creation based on the pain chain that was just validated by the customer. Now, let's say after the customer conversation or a series of conversations, customer confides in you that they're having a different problem. The good news there is that they feel free to share and view you as a partner. That's the good news. And bear in mind, customer success is a bit of a long game. Obviously, working with enterprises, we all have this experience where we know that any kind of upsell, any kind of strategic partnership, it takes a good deal of investment of time. But this is a great start. Customer is feeling free to share his views, considers you a partner. That's a great starting point. And you may not have a solution for their problem right then, but that's where you can work on developing that vision that could be implemented in the future. Now, let's say if you come across a situation where a customer doesn't admit any problem, but remains engaged, wants to talk, which in itself is great news. Customer is looking to remain engaged. The bad news, of course, there is that you've not arrived at the point of pain. So your pain chain model that you may have built, that you may have worked on, hasn't been validated, right? That's a great point to ask situation questions to direct the conversation towards a potential pain point. And this is where the research that you may have done about the customer comes in really handy, because now you have the opportunity to actually talk through some of the things that you have seen, read, and experienced about the customer in your research. There are times when customers are not quite ready to recognize or admit pain point as well. And that's kind of where it's the CSM's job to really come up with, I would say, questions that are able to sort of be part of a menu of questions, if you will, that are related to that specific LOB. So try and get specific then about the different LOBs that you might be talking to. If you're talking to somebody in finance, or if you're talking to somebody in HR, if you're talking to somebody in legal, for instance, this is the point where getting a little more specificity about the function of that arm in the organization can be helpful. And again, it'll build on the pain chain that you're trying to build as well. I've come across situations in the past where a customer says, you know what, Shahab, this is exactly the pain, and guess what? We're already working on it. And we're halfway through the project, or we're halfway through implementation, or come join us at the go live party. That has happened to me, and it's fine. I guess the good news there is that you have actually hit on something, that you have discovered the source of pain late in the game, but you have something in hand. And that's kind of where you can talk about their current vision. What is it that's driving this vision? What is it that's driving this implementation, the element of the vision that's actually critical to the customer. The idea is to try and get to the crux of that, and then enhance it or engineer that vision from that point on. So that's the key element here, is that all these situations will happen at one point or another. There will be a time when customer will be having the same problem that you've identified. Again, that's a great thing. That's bullseye, as I put it here on the slide. And then obviously having a different problem, not admitting to the problem, maybe the customer hasn't realized it, they're not ready to recognize it. The other place where I've seen this happen is where the pain chain is limited. I'm sorry, not the pain chain. Pain itself is limited, where it may be limited to one part of the organization, and the other part of the organization hasn't quite realized it, or they don't see it the same way, or by the time the workflow gets to them, they don't see that pain coming with it. They may have a different process to handle that workflow in their department. If HR sends a document to be processed to legal, they may have a pain that's involving HR in how they do it, how they send it over. But then legal may have a process in place that may be painless for them, and they may not recognize the pain that HR is going through. And that's kind of where I've seen this happen, where the realization of pain hasn't quite occurred, hasn't quite happened, because the pain that HR has is impacting all of workflow. It's not just impacting HR, it's impacting all of the workflow, because whatever delay and pain is caused on the HR's end is part of that overall workflow. And that's the vision creation part. That's where you have to talk to the customer about the vision as a whole. And I've had good amount of success in my time talking to customers and helping them realize that, you know, people that they're working with may be going through or experiencing something that they haven't quite seen. And I've seen a good amount of success where people actually realize that and move from that and move to act from that point on. So these are some of the scenarios that I wanted to cover here as well. By the way, this brings up an excellent point that I should have mentioned also on the slide, which is that one of the key things, one of the more successful pain chain models is the one where you're able to go with a workflow across organizations. So be it legal, be it HR, be it finance, be it engineering, whatever it is, that the more successful pain chain is the one where you are involving multiple organizations. And that's a key to remember as well. So what do we do once we identify something, once we come across something that is painful? I've highlighted some of the sort of the reasons for pain, the exploration that you have to do, and then, you know, the capabilities that you have to visualize. What are some of the things that CSM can do when it comes to these three action points? So obviously in discovery of reason for pain, open-ended questions. You know, you're early in the conversation, you don't want it to become too focused, you want to try and cover as much ground as possible, right? Then there are the element of control questions, right? These are moving from open-ended to closed-ended questions. And I think folks who've been in support, for example, would see the methodology, kind of the similar methodology that support folks used to have, which was in the beginning, you ask the more open-ended questions if you're talking to the user, and then you try to get to the control question, get to the closed-ended question where you're trying to get the pithy answers to get to the confirmations. And obviously that's the third element. The confirmation question is the third element, where you're basically ensuring that what you've heard is what the user has said. Again, many conversations have gone by the wayside because what the user said wasn't what the person heard. And by the way, this is in-person conversations, so it's important to ensure that you have those confirmed questions handy when you're talking to customers. The key element that you want to explore in open-ended questions is that you want to explore sort of the interdependency. As I mentioned, pain chain models are only as successful as when you are able to get multiple organizations covered in them. And that's where the open-ended questions can also help with the interdependency part. So during exploration, it's key that we get to that point and we try and cover that as much as possible. When it comes to control questions that are part of the exploration, you want to, again, continue to try and explore the spread of the problem. And in exploration, there is nothing more important than confirmed questions again. Restatement of the pain, making sure that you understand the verbiage used by the customer, the impact, all of that. All of that gets into the sort of the confirmed questions. And this is where you're going to build the meat of the pain chain, by the way. Confirmed questions on exploration is where you're going to build the meat of the pain chain. The third part of the conversation, where you're trying to visualize the capabilities, starts out with open-ended questions, but it also meshes together the control and confirm questions. So that's because the complication with visualization capability is that you're still sort of talking in abstract when you're trying to create a vision. It's not on the ground yet. And so be very careful about your control questions and your confirm questions in this aspect, because the customer may not have very solid answers to your questions. And it's no fault of their own. They've obviously they've realized the pain, but they may not have done the homework to figure out what this pain does, how it impacts them, and your questions may be may show the customer in an early stage of thinking as well. So that's where sort of control and confirm questions also mesh together in the third stage of visualization and prescription. So while you're having these conversations with customers, there are basically stages that you can recognize where the customer is at this point dealing with this pain. And you may actually come across competition. You may actually come across competition where customers are already working on some part of the pain with another vendor or a competitor. Bear in mind that there are only a handful of strategies that you have in your hands. Obviously, there's a head-to-head strategy. Again, very expensive. You need to have a very significant advantage against your competitor to use this successfully. The other is the end-around strategy, is referred to as end-around strategy. And that's where you're sort of adding to the vision. You're not completely re-engineering it, but you're adding to the vision that the customer has already built. And you're not, obviously, this is to be utilized when you're not the first one in the account, right? You're not in the column A of solutions that they have built in trying to solve a pain. Divide and conquer is another element of this, where basically it's to be used when you're facing tall odds against a competitive solution or a vision, and when you've decided that you're going to go after part of the business instead of the whole thing. So when you've decided on what we at Box call a coexist strategy, that's where divide and conquer comes into play. That's where you take a look at the use cases, take a look at the pain, and figure out what part of the pain can you serve best. Excuse me. The last part of this is the stall strategy, which is not my favorite name, but that's part of what it's referred to as stall strategy. It's only utilized by market leaders mostly. And this is kind of where you partner with the customer to provide value in other areas like product development, or maybe it's product referrals, things like that. And this strategy is kind of used when the solution is not entirely ready, the vision is not fully re-engaged or re-engineered. So these are some of the competitive strategies that you will come across as you play on that pain chain model that you've built in conversation with your customer, as you bring that out, as you have those conversations with customers. These are some of the possibilities that that'll be available to you. So before I walk you through sort of an application of example of mine where I was able to utilize a pain chain model that I built, I also want to address a couple of things about pain chain that I think are important to remember. One, as I mentioned, it is a living, breathing document, right? All of these customer conversations and engagements that I've mentioned above in slides before, they're going to hammer at your pain chain model that you may have built after a long bout with research and work that may have gone into it. You may end up completely redefining it altogether after that conversation, which is fine. The idea that with the pain chain model is that you're supposed to have that proper agenda, proper vision in place that you can take to the customer for a relevant conversation, for a relevant engagement. CSM's role is that of a trusted partner, a trusted advisor. And when you are talking to the customer, the thing that becomes paramount with the pain chain model is the customer's pain. And that's the holy grail, if you will. So let me get into the application example. As you will see, I have, I'm a Star Trek fan, so I've actually changed the names of people that were involved to protect the identity of the innocent. But this is a company that works on construction, and their CEO, Captain Picard, decided that he cares about net zero construction. Well, what does that mean? Net zero construction essentially means that when you construct something, that you provide for the environmental concerns, where the environmental impact of that construction is zeroed out. And that's sort of his priority. That's something that he identified as a priority. And what he did was he transferred that priority to Will, who was the CFO in this case, reporting into him. The key element of net zero construction was that the CEO decided that they're going to get most amount of innovation from outside the company. And so he's going to need to have a rigorous M&A program in place. Now, the focus was on design companies, smaller startup companies with great ideas. But for that, he needed to make sure that his finances remain in place for him and clear enough for him to be utilized when needed. So that meant that Will, who had LaForge, the CTO, reporting into him, essentially had to make sure that all the systems that were reporting numbers up to Will's office were talking to each other, and that there were no broken bridges between these systems. So this became LaForge's priority. His priority was, how do I make sure that the software systems that are reporting these numbers up to Will are consistent and are talking to each other? So you see how net zero becomes M&A rigor, becomes software interoperability as you go down to the CTO. The CTO has Deanna Troy reporting to him as a VP of IT. And what Deanna identified when talking to LaForge was that integration between the systems that she has in play in her landscape is going to be a key element going forward. So what she did was she had Data, who was reporting into her, become sort of the national integration manager and provide for the system integrations to be in place. Now, if you look at this pain chain map, you have different priorities for every level. When you talk to the CEO, when you talk to the CFO, when you talk to the CTO, all these folks have different priorities in how this is going to work. And I should mention Worf here. He also reports into Picard, by the way, but he's concerned about overall management. And while he's not directly part of the pain chain here, he's an important voice. So I wanted to make sure that he gets added into the pain chain, even though, again, he is not part, the pain doesn't directly impact him, but it indirectly does because he's part of the overall management. And so the key element here to remember is that when you're building your pain chain model, you want to make sure that all the people that are important to decision making are included. If they're not part of the pain chain, that they're included, as I've included Wharf, for example, here, that they're included there because it gives you visibility into the setup of the customer. Of course, the pain chain itself is sort of a living, breathing part of this, which skips over Wharf in this case. But I know that he's important to the setup. I know that we need him to be in place, even though, again, he's not part of the immediate pain chain model. So this is an example of what a real life pain chain looks like. And I am now going into Q&A. Before we go into Q&A, in fact, let me actually highlight the resources. I want to mention that for Pain Chain, the book by Keith M. Eads is a seminal book. It's a definitive write-up on solution selling, and Pain Chain is something that is extracted from that model. I also blog at Substack about Pain Chain and about customer success. Feel free to check that out. That's part of the learning as well that I can share with folks. Thank you, Ryan. I see you're here.
Shahab, what a great presentation. Thank you. I love your timing of this presentation too, as we close this third day of SX Live, talking about customer success and how customer success's mindset can be applied across the organization. I love how you talked about how really everyone in an organization should be responsible for customer success, and not just customer success with the product that you're in charge of ensuring your customer is good with. That's sort of like a traditional idea of customer success. But what I loved about this presentation is that you're really looking at how can my customer succeed in their business, and I think that's the start of a great partnership. I love that. I got a couple questions during your presentation that I want to throw at you. The first question that we got is, could you discuss your tech stack? What are the tools that you're using to pair with this strategy? If someone was just getting into this and wanted to take your approach, what things should they go out and use from a technology standpoint?
So I think that when it comes to building a pain chain itself, obviously there's a lot of absorption tools that are out there for customers, including, for example, you start out with a CRM system of any kind, really. We at Box use Salesforce, for instance. There are many other tech tools that are out there that can be utilized for ensuring that you have proper action plans in place when it comes to building of this and then delivering of this. When it comes to support, there's a good deal of tools that are also available out there. Again, at Box, we use Zendesk for support, and that's a great tool as well, which allows us, again, a view into the sort of the support delivery that's happening to these customers. And by the way, I should mention that whatever tech stack you may have that you may be going through at your company, the key element that you want to utilize in that tech stack is visibility. So if it's giving you visibility into your customer's pain point, then that becomes important. I mentioned, obviously, tools that are out there in terms of social media tools, even, that are now becoming important to do your research. LinkedIn, obviously, is the usual choice, but there's a great deal more out there to do your research on and to gather intelligence and information on, where you can actually become relevant to your customers' pain and solution.
That makes a lot of sense. Another question I have here: do you have advice for startups? And there's so many generative AI tools getting started right now. There's so many things being worked on so quickly. Do you have advice for startups engaging with customers and they have solutions that aren't yet ready or they're still in development? What we saw from your pain chain example is that stalling is not really an option. How would you handle being in that scenario?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's where the building of the user profile is so important. For any startup that's out there building a product, maybe it's in a stage where the product is not quite there yet. The best thing to do is to refine that user profile to the point where you take away the frills completely, and you're able to then apply the product in the stage that it's at, right? So to me, when a startup when I'm talking to a startup leader or a startup company, if the question comes as, our product is not quite ready, my question to them typically is, have you considered looking at your user profile that you built? Perhaps that is in need of some refinement as well. Product never gets fully built. Product will always be in a stage of building. It'll always remain in that stage. But maybe at this stage where you are right now, there is a user that's out there that needs that product. You just haven't refined that user profile to the point where you can recognize that user. And so that's the key element, I think. That's where I've seen startups stumble a little bit because they maybe not have had the chance to spend as much time on refining their user profile that they're going after.
I think that's great advice. Shahab, that's all the questions I'm seeing. Thank you so much for joining us for SX Live. Do you have any final closing statements?
No, I just wanted to thank the team at Support Logic, and thank you for folks listening to me today. And again, feel free to reach out. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them and field them beyond this.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, everyone. Take care.